Hello everybody. Today we're going to go over the Corruption of the Weak upgrade path that you can use in the new Crusade Amidst the Ashes mission pack. And we're just going to go over basically how that system works. And we're even going to try to explain GWEs into good common sense English, and we're even going to give a couple examples of how it would work so that you can use it in your own campaign games. The Corruption of the Weak is a path for basically upgrading Psyker models in your Crusade force. It is one of two paths that are laid out in this particular Crusade update book. The other one being mostly for Mechanicus, which we may or may not cover at another time. And it comes with a number of different abilities and the like. So before we get right into it or go through all the details, let's go into who can use it. Of course, the obvious users of the Corruption of the Weak would be Death Guard, Sorcerer models, but you could just as easily use it for Chaos Sorcerer models, such as an Alpha Legion, Word Bearers, Sorcerer, or Thousand Suns if you have them. Of course, one of the nice things about the Corruption of the Weak tree is it is non-faction specific, only requires a Psyker, which means you can show, say, an Imperial Guard Primaris Psyker slowly getting corrupted, and you can actually run that on top of an Astra Militarum army and run that path as well. Of course, you're not limited to only Astra Militarum. You can do Space Marines. But one of the really nice things about this particular upgrade tree that you can use is it allows you to also do things with Inquisitor. So you can take Inquisitor models and not named characters like Greyfax, but your own personal Inquisitor models and run them down this path. The reason I find that so cool is it allows you to, on a tabletop, narratively, to show the progression of an Inquisitor from what you see above to what he ends up becoming down below. Basically, it allows you to, if you want to take an Inquisitor and follow the path of the Radical, like Eisenhorn and others, it allows you to do so. Furthermore, narratively, it makes sense if you already are running an Inquisitor with Demon Hosts and the like to go down the Corruption of the Weak path, where they do get corrupted and start using psychic powers a little bit more, delve into things they shouldn't, and eventually get to the point where you get something like this on the tabletop. The other reason I really like this upgrade path that you can take and throw into your models is because in the current setting of Warhammer 40,000, we are also in the midst of the great awakening, echoes of awakening, and you have the psychic awakening going on. And basically the Great Rift has opened up, and as it says right here, the Great Rift blights the skies of every world in the galaxy, imprinting a ragged blemish unto the eye and the minds of any who dare who look upon it. Fears, omens, and rabid hysteria clog box nets and shatter astropathic ducts as terror grips humanity. To those who listen, their individual significance melds into a greater whole, and a terrible new age begins to crystallize. Bear in mind, right now, any Psyker has just had their power boosted. Any latent Psyker has just had their psychic ability awaken. And you have all kinds of, byblows as a result. Demonic incursion, cults, uprisings, mass hysteria. And personally, I think these new rules in our upgrade tree really helps you kind of add that feel to your regular Crusade games of Warhammer 40,000. So now we come to how does the Corruption of the Weak tree works. And basically, it runs off of two things, requisition points and corruption points. Now, the very first step in order to do this is you have to use warp corruption. You purchase this requisition when mustering your army for an Amidst the Ashes battle. If your crusade force does not have a warp corruption or a machine mastery notes on its order of battle, add the warp corruption note to your order of battle and start a counter for corruption points, beginning with 1 corruption point. So instantly, you spend the 1 requisition point, you automatically get 1 warp corruption point. And to further advance a character, you're going to need to use requisition points and corruption points. And how does one get more corruption points? You can gain corruption points from using certain agendas, such as poison their minds, which will give you corruption points. Certain other ones, such as subterfuge, will also give you corruption points, and a few others. But that is not the only way to gain corruption points. You can also gain corruption points by playing missions such as Turn Out the Lights, and anyone who's played a Crusade mission knows there's normally a victor bonus. In this case, there's your standard, and then also it'll give you, like in this one, the attacker is the victor and they have the warp corruption note on their order of battle. If their crusade force gains 1 corruption point for each destroyed generator objective. That's for this simple fun mission where your goal is basically turn out the lights on the compound so that terror and anarchy reign supreme. It's a fun little mission, and it does not have to be played in just the Caradon Warzone. That's one thing I want to make very, very clear. A lot of the missions in the Amidst the Ashes Crusade pack, easily playable for other, outside of the Caradon Warzone in your standard Crusade games. Also of note, some of the little missions in here, such as the boarding action alike, does not just hand out a warp corruption point. Some of them allow you to take some of the upgrades for free without the use of a requisition point, which can be very, very, very handy, especially as, if you're like me, you're holding on to most of your requisition points to add to your order of battle by increasing power levels allowed in your roster. So you start off with using the warp corruption, 1 requisition point. So now that you have corruption of the week on your whole army list, which means you can now start using stuff from corruption on the week on any individual psyker that is in your list and order of battle. Now the very next step is a Mind Twisted, 1 requisition point. Purchase this requisition at any time if your Crusade force has a warp corruption note and at least 1 corruption point. Select 1 psyker model from your army, excluding named characters, whose unit has the battle ready or blooded rank, but does not have the corrupted mind keyword. That model unit gains the corrupted mind keyword, and that model gains 1 level 1 ability selected from the corruption of the week tree on the opposite page. Corrupted mind units cannot gain further experience points or ranks. Increase that unit's crusade points by 1 and subtract 1 from your crusade's force corruption points. So let's put this in non-GWEs. Basically, pick a psyker. Now, you can't pick a high-level psyker who's already gone up in Crusade to, say, battle-hardened, a level 2, or heroic or legendary. You either do it before they've gained any abilities yet, so they're 0 to 5 experience, or where they've gained their first experiences where they're at 6 to 15 points, they're blooded, they've gained 1 battle honor already. Personally, I'd wait until you actually had someone who was blooded, so they gained a battle honor, simply because the second you add this to them, they cannot gain any more battle honors. They are cut off from weapon upgrades, from psychic upgrades, from battle traits, from even getting relics and the like at that point, because now they are locked on to the corruption of the weak path. Now, what you gain is a level 1 ability. And there are 2 of them. And you'll also notice the arrows. This is important because that will come into play here shortly. Now at level 1, they then gain the, say they go with Whispers of Despair. At the start of the morale phase, select 1 enemy unit within 12 inches of this model. Until the end of that phase, subtract 1 from the leadership characteristic of models in that unit. So you can pick a unit that your psyker is nearby and you're draining their leadership by 1. Not fantastic, not potentially not game-changing per se, and it doesn't seem like much, but when you start combining it with a few other things, it can add up. And furthermore, it's very, very, very narrative in a way because, hey, the psyker's making you uncomfortable. It makes everything kind of seem like, eh. And if you're a good guy, or relative good guy, Inquisition and like it, you can just chalk that up to being an Inquisitor, or the fact, well, it's a battle psyker. They're sanctioned, but, no one's ever actually fully comfortable with them. So it's easy to dismiss. And if you're, chaos, well, this is just great. You're whispering despair. You are spreading gloom and doom. And let's face it, you enter a room and people kind of look up and they're terrified of you. So it's a nice little narrative thing. Now, the other thing you can do is Murmurs of Disorder. At the start of the fight phase, select 1 enemy unit within 6 inches of this model. Until the end of that phase, that unit and the models in it do not count as having made a charge move this turn. So they don't get to swing first necessarily. You can interrupt them then. It's a nice little thing. It just means that the presence of this psyker is disrupting to their mind. Even though they made the charge, things are just not in sync. And they're a little bit off and thus easy meat for your guys. Again, very cool narratively. Not super powerful, but hey, it's only level 1 on this chart. Now let's go back over to the next one. After you've done a Mind Twisted, you can do Journey of Darkness. Let's read the GW version and then let's try to tidy it up a bit. Purchase this requisition at any time if your Crusade force has the Warp Corruption note. Select 1 Corrupted Mind Psyker, i.e. somebody who's already at level 1, from your army. That model gains 1 additional ability. If able, select from the Corruption of the Weak tree. Increase the Crusade points of that model's unit by 1. If the selected ability is a level 2 ability, subtract 2 from your Crusade's Corruption points. Otherwise, subtract 3 from your Crusade's Corruption points. So basically, if you're going to now go up to level 2, you're going to have to spend 2 Corruption points to gain the ability. Now, on the upgrade tree, GW says, each time you select a new ability from the tree opposite for a Corrupted Mind Psyker model in your army, if that model does not have a level 2 ability, you must select a level 2 ability that is connected by an arrow to the level 1 ability that it already has. If that model already has a level 2 ability, you must select a level 3 ability that is connected by an arrow to that level 2 ability. Units cannot have more than 1 level 3 ability. So yes, some things will let you go back and actually add, say you took Whispers of Despair. Some of the missions will allow you to then actually gain another level 1 ability just for winning the game, and you can get Murmurs of Disorder as well. However, let's go back to the Journey of Darkness. Okay? You have your Psyker. You've now decided that you're going to upgrade him to level 2. Now you're going to have to spend 2 corruption points, and you're going to have to follow the tree. Now, if you went with Whispers of Despair, you're either going to go with Aspect of Hopelessness. It's an aura ability. While an enemy unit is within 6 inches of this model, each time a morale test is failed for that unit, D3 models flee instead of just 1. And bear in mind, that's stacked with that -1 leadership. So when you're within 12 of them. So that can get pretty useful. Or you can go with Warp Emanations. While an enemy unit is within 6 inches of this model, the command reroll stratagem costs 2 command points instead of 1 command point when used to reroll test or saving throw made for that unit or model in it. So this one you can use to basically, if you're right up close, they goofed up a smite, didn't get it, well, no, and they want to use a command point, well, guess what, it's going to cost more command points to do it. Or when it comes to re-rolling, say, even a leadership test, if they didn't go with the insane courage, or a saving throw. So not bad. Now, the warp emanations, this aura ability, can come from either Whispers of Despair or Murmurs of Disorder. Either one will allow you to move down to that one. Now, Murmurs of Despair's one here is Aura of Restlessness. Aura. While a friendly unit is within 6 inches of this model, each time that unit is selected to advance, add 1 to the advance roll. Which, isn't bad, isn't great. Now, if you want to get to level 3, you're going to have to use the Journey of Darkness again, which is again going to cost you a requisition point. And in this case, since it's a level 3, it's going to cost you 3 corruption points. And say you went with Aspect of Hopelessness, you can either get the Psychic Power Wane Resolve or Psychic Barrage. If you went with Warp Emanations, you can either take Psychic Barrage or Devourer of Weakness. If you went with Aura of Restlessness, you get the Devourer of Weakness or Terrifying Inferno. So it's kind of important to map these out in advance. Now, what do these psychic powers do? Well, one, yes, you spent a requisition point to get to level 3, but you're also gaining a new psychic power. For example, Wane Resolve. Malediction. Wane Resolve has a warp charge value of 6. If manifested, select one enemy unit within 18 inches of this psyker. Then roll 1d6 and add this psyker's leadership characteristic to the result. Your opponent then rolls 1d6 and adds that unit's leadership characteristic to the result. If your total is higher than your opponent's, till the start of your next psychic phase, that unit loses the objective secured ability, which can come in pretty handy, especially if you're fighting over something like the Relic, or you're down and behind on objectives. Psychic Barrage. Malediction. Psychic Barrage has a warp charge value of 7. If manifested, select one enemy unit within 12 inches of this psyker. Then roll 1d6 and add the psyker's leadership characteristic to the result. If your opponent rolls 1d6 and adds that unit's leadership characteristics to the results, if your total is higher than your opponent's, that unit fails any action it is performing, and until the start of your next psychic phase cannot start to perform any actions. This one's kind of useful, especially in Crusade, as far as people use agendas and actions to try to level themselves up faster, gain experience points by, say, searching for archaeotech or sabotaging an item. It's okay. It's not a personal favorite of mine. And be fair, also Wane Resolve, again, doesn't really do it for me. Then we have Devourer of Weakness. The Psyker gluts himself on the weakness of his enemies. Now, this is a Witchfire power. A Devourer of Weakness has a warp charge value of 6. If manifested, select one enemy unit within 12 inches of the Psyker, then roll 1d6 and add the Psyker's leadership characteristic to the result. Your opponent rolls 1d6 and adds his unit leadership characteristic to the result. If you got a higher total than your opponent, then that enemy unit suffers a number of mortal wounds equal to the difference between the two totals to a maximum of 5 mortal wounds. And this model regains 1 lost wound. So basically, you are being a psychic vampire in a way. You're casting this power, causing mortal wounds if your leadership's higher. And let's face it, a number of these things actually cause leadership to go down. So you're more likely to do it. And at the same time, you're healing yourself. You're getting more powerful. I compared this a little bit to the Mummy, how Imhotep wasn't quite whole, but then he started devouring people who had come across him and regained more power and grew stronger, or you can use it as basically a psychic vampire. I mean, it's just grabbing onto the warp essence of their soul, sucking it out from a distance, and healing themselves with it. It's kind of a fun little power. I like it, but, that's me. Then we have Terrifying Inferno. The Psyker unleashes witchfire that takes the form of hideous monsters, terrifying those not burnt to a crisp by the scorching flames. Now, this is a witchfire power as well. Terrifying Inferno has a warp charge value of 8, a little harder to pull off. If manifested, select one enemy unit within 18 inches of this Psyker. Then roll 1d6 and add your leadership to the result. Your opponent then rolls a d6 and adds his leadership characteristic to the result. If your total is higher than your opponent's, that enemy unit suffers d3 mortal wounds, basically a smite, and until the end of the turn, subtract 1 from combat attrition tests taken for that unit. So if you were to hit them with a smite and this, you could potentially take out, say, 6 guys out of a 10-man squad. They're below 50%. So now if they were to fail leadership, and again, you're running plenty of things that screw up leadership, you're, instead of on a 1 or a 2, if they are below 50%, it's a 1, 2, and 3. A model is removed when it comes to combat attrition. So it's a smite and then some. And let's face it, the description of the Terrifying Inferno just really kind of fits with the rogue witches on the loose kind of agenda thing for it. So now that we have gone over the rules, let's actually take a look at how the Corruption of the Weak works in actual practice with a sample model. In this case, it's going to be the character Decretus the Dread, Master of Possession for the Alpha Legion 7th Hydra Company. Model that I have right here. And we're going to go over his stats real quick to begin with. Now, here we have it where we've already paid 1 requisition point to throw Warp Corruption on the entire army so that I can pick out Psykers at will. And when I made this particular HQ, I paid 1 requisition point right up top off the bat just to give him a Warlord trait like Flames of Spite. Wound rolls of 6+ inflict an additional mortal wound. Not much, but it adds 1 to his crusade point. He's got a bolt pistol, 4-stave, grenades, and he knows the following psychic powers right off the bat. Smite, Incursion, which allows him to bring in demons, and Cursed Earth, which allows him to boost demons. Boost their saving throws by 1. He also has the right of possession, which means any Psyker, not him, not Chaos, nearby him that tries doing any kind of psychic test, any doubles causes perils of the warp. He is just awful. And he ignores perils of the warp when it comes to him, when it comes to summoning in demons and the like. He's got a 4-stave, nothing too out of the ordinary there. And let's say he's played, he's 5 power rating, had 1 crusade point, and he played 2 games. And he destroyed 3 enemy units. 5 total units. He destroyed, 1 in 1 battle, and 3 others in total with psychic powers, and destroyed 1 unit, 2 in total for with melee weapons. So he's got, taken out 5 units, which gives him 1 XP. He's got 2 battles played that gives him 3 XP. He's gained Master of the Warp, which gave him another 2. So that puts him at 5, or gives him another XP. And then he was an MVP of Game 2. Basically, you pick 1 unit that, performed the best. Say he brought in the demons at just the right amount of time, boosted them, got that, and gained 3 more experience points to put him at 6. Now, with 6, he goes from just battle ready to blooded, and he gets his very first battle honor. And in this case, we went with Master of Lore. So with Master of Lore, what we did, it gives him, it's a basic upgrade in the basic book, because the NKS does not have their own codex yet. But what it is it gives you an additional psychic power that you know. In this case, we went with possession so that he can turn, creatures he attacks with his staff into spawn, or if he kills a marine, he can turn it into a greater possessed. Nice, narrative kind of cool thing. So here he is. He's at level, he's at 2 crusade points because he now has 1 battle honor, and he also had the warlord trait. So he's worth 2 crusade points. He's only got 1 battle honor. And right about now is when I decide that, you know what? I'm done upgrading him. He is done. He will no longer be able to gain experience. The only drawback to that is I won't be able to subtract experience from him if he gets injured. To avoid injuries, I'll have to spend requisition points to heal any battle scars that he gains in the future. But doesn't matter. I'm going to freeze him as is, as according to the rules, in order to spend points on Corruption of the Weak. So at this point, I spend 1 of my requisition points I have left, and I spend the 1 corruption point I've gotten for just taking warp corruption in the first place for the whole Legion, and we're going to throw on his first Corruption of the Weak ability. And we are going to go with Whispers of Despair. So now, our Dread Psyker not only does he cause perils more easily for anyone nearby him who is not chaos, and not only does he know all this lore, he's gone kind of the cheap route, and now he inspires a little bit of dread. And he can pick 1 unit within 12 inches of him and take away 1 from their leadership at this point. And here's where it gets interesting with the Corruption of the Weak. Now he's frozen here. He's going to gain another crusade point at this point. So it'll be up to 3 crusade points because he's got the Whispers of Despair. So what does that mean? What that means at this point is he's gained a crusade point and he's gained an ability. Now, if he was to do this the normal way through leveling up, he would have probably needed to play, he would have needed at least that, he would have needed around 15 to 30 experience points rather than 6 to level up. So as you can see, using this, you can level up your Psykers really fast. Now, a little later on, we go with a Mind Twisted. We spend the 1 requisition point, and we've gained like 2 corruption points, so we spend 2 corruption points. And now, instead of just Whispers of Despair, we also have Warp Emanations coming off of him. So, when he gets in close, it is even harder to use command points as far as rerolls. Your leadership is down 1. He's causing you to have perils more often if you're trying to use the psychic power. And don't forget, dealing his own hand-to-hand combat. He's got that Force Stave and Flames of Spite, which are giving off mortal wounds whenever he rolls a 6 to wound anyway. So throw onto that the possession power that he can be running, Smite, Cursed Earth, which increases the demon save, and he's starting to look rather scary. And since he's got Warp Emanations, he is now at Crusade points 4. And again, normally you'd need a lot, and here we go. He plays another game, does a number of agendas which cause a lot more corruption points, and he spends Journey into Darkness. He spends 1 more requisition point, and he spends an additional 3 corruption points to give him 1 level 3 power. And listening to this earlier, I'm sure you can guess which power he gained. He is going to go with Devourer of Weakness. So Now he's got a Witchfire ability on top of Smite, on top of Possession, on top of Incursion, and on top of Cursed Earth, which will allow him to basically go up against opponent's leadership after lowering it slightly and causing up to 5 mortal wounds and regaining 1 wound. So he's healing himself. He's a vampire. So now we have a character that is roaming around, and in just, no more than 6 or 7 games, he's already gotten, because of that last upgrade, he is at 5 crusade points. He can't gain any more experience, can't gain weapon upgrades or the like, but he is at 5 crusade points. That puts him at legendary level, and he's got a bunch of abilities. He now knows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 psychic powers. He has a warlord trait that he can run all the time. He also has an aura ability that causes command rerolls to cost 1 more whenever he's in close contact. And he's got the Whispers of Despair, where he can drop down a unit's opponent's leadership by 1 just by being in proximity. Add to the fact that any doubles rolled on a psychic test when within a certain range of him also causes Perils of the Warp, and you have a really dreadful Psyker on the way. Now, and you got there super quick. It is the cheap and easy route, which cheap and easy route to power, but leads to ultimate damnation, which is, let's face it, that is the basis of chaos. So very thematic, a lot of fun. And like I said, you can also be running this with, say, an Inquisitor, showing, like they said in Eisenstein, crossing the line, going from a good guy Inquisitor to, oh, I'm a little bit of a radical, but it's all good. I'm a little bit more radical, but it's all good. And okay, yeah, I'm using possessed, demon hosts, and I've got a couple demons at my beck and call, but I need chaos to fight chaos. It's all good. It's all good. You can't judge me. And anyone who judges me is a fool and needs to be destroyed. So it allows you to play a lot of those narrative type games and kind of build up even narrative campaigns. For those of you who do not do role-playing games like Black Crusade or Dark Heresy, it's a fun way of kind of incorporating it into your basic narrative game. And it's something that GW has really done a good job with throwing this in. I can't wait after seeing this to see what they end up doing when they come out with the Inquisitor stuff for Crusade. I'm guessing it might be a continuation of this, maybe expanded further. Again, I could wish list for quite a while on there. I'm sure you could as well, but I think it bodes well for the future. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please hit like down below and hit subscribe. Thank you very much.